I spent $4,000 to become invisible. A North Face Bastion 4-4 season tent, a Garmin InReach Mini 2 satellite communicator, and enough Mountain House freeze-dried meals to sustain a small platoon for a fortnight. I wanted to disappear. After the divorce was finalized in September, after the lawyers took their cut and the house in Burnaby was sold to a couple in their 20s who looked far too happy, silence seemed like the only medicine that would actually work. I did not want a resort. I did not want a singles cruise. I wanted the deep, indifferent quiet of the Cascade Mountains. I wanted to be somewhere where the only notifications I received were the rising sun and the shifting wind. It is ironic, is not it? I spent months researching the perfect topographical maps, reading forums on Reddit r/ultralight, and buying the highest-rated gear to ensure I could survive the elements. I was looking for a place where no one would look at me, where I would not be perceived by anyone. Instead, I walked myself directly into the living room of something that never stopped watching. I am a solutions architect for a cloud data firm. My entire life is built on logic, redundancies, and risk mitigation. If a server goes down, there is a backup. If the backup fails, there is a disaster recovery protocol. I approach my life the same way. I do not believe in ghosts. I do not believe in cryptids. And I certainly do not believe in bad energy. I believe in cause and effect. I believe in physics. But physics could not explain what happened in that clearing. And my redundancy plans did not account for the fact that sometimes the threat is not a storm or a broken leg. Sometimes the threat is just a variable you refused to acknowledge until it was standing 3 feet away from you, smelling like wet copper and rot. The trip started on a Tuesday in mid-October. I chose Tuesday specifically because the analytics showed that trail traffic dropped by 85% midweek. I did not want to run into weekend warriors, with their Bluetooth speakers blasting Taylor Swift or groups of college kids carrying coolers of beer. I drove a 2019 Subaru Outback, slate gray. A cliché for the Pacific Northwest, I know, but I bought it for the all-wheel drive, not the aesthetic. I remember the drive out of the city vividly. It was raining, that specific, gray, relentless drizzle that Seattle residents stop noticing after a while, but which feels like a wet blanket to everyone else. I had the heated seats set to level 2. Not too hot, just enough to keep the lumbar support pliable against my lower back. The car smelled like the new car scent Little Trees air freshener I bought at an AutoZone 3 weeks prior, mixed with the faint, acidic aroma of the Starbucks Pike Place roast in my travel mug. I remember taking a sip around 10 o'clock a.m., just as I passed the exit for Snoqualmie. It was lukewarm. I drank it anyway, more for the ritual than the caffeine. For the first hour, I listened to a podcast about the collapse of the Bronze Age civilizations. Felt fitting. The narrator was talking about how entire empires could vanish in a single generation due to systems collapse. I felt a kinship with those crumbling cities. My own little empire, my marriage, my suburban home, my 5-year plan, had collapsed in under 8 months. By the time I hit the Forest Service roads, the pavement had turned to gravel. The sound changed from a hum to a crunch, thrum crunch, the tires fighting for traction on the whetstones. I turned the radio off. The silence inside the cabin was heavy, pressurized. I checked my dashboard. 58 degrees outside. The sky was a bruised purple gray, the clouds hanging low enough to snag on the tops of the Douglas firs. I passed a faded sign. National Forest Access. No winter maintenance. This was it. The rational part of my brain, the part that organized spreadsheets, did a quick inventory check. Water filtration, Sawyer squeeze, checked. First aid, adventure medical kit, 7, checked. Bear spray, counter assault, 10. 2 ounces, checked. I parked at the trailhead around 1 o'clock p.m. There was only one other vehicle in the lot. A rusted-out Chevy Silverado with a cracked windshield and a bumper sticker that was too faded to read. It looked abandoned, like it had been sitting there since the 90s. Moss was growing in the wheel wells. I noted it, filed it away as junk, and did not give it a second thought. A rationalization. People dump cars in the woods all the time to avoid scraping fees. I got out of the Subaru. The air hit me like a physical blow. Cold, crisp, and saturated with the scent of pine needles and damp decay. It was the smell of oxygen being made. I opened the trunk and began the ritual of gearing up. My pack was an Osprey Atmos AG65. I had weighed it at home on a digital kitchen scale, 38. For pounds. I tightened the hip belt, feeling the weight transfer from my shoulders to my iliac crest. It was a comforting weight. Felt like armor. I locked the car. Beep beep. The sound echoed through the trees, unnatural and sharp. I winced. I was an intruder here, bringing my digital noises into an analog world. I started walking. The hike was supposed to be a 6-mile loop up to a subalpine lake called Mirror Basin. The trail was steep, a switchback staircase of roots and mud. For the first hour, my internal monologue was loud. I was arguing with my ex-wife in my head, replaying the mediation session where we fought over who got the espresso machine. It's a Breville, Mark. You do not even drink lattes. It's about the principle, Sarah. Pathetic. I was walking through one of the most majestic landscapes in North America, surrounded by trees that were saplings when Columbus landed, and I was thinking about a kitchen appliance. But around mile 3, the forest bathing effect finally kicked in. My heart rate settled into a rhythm, 110 beats per minute, steady. The lactic acid burn in my quads became a dull, rhythmic thrum. I stopped thinking about the divorce. I started thinking about the placement of my boots on the slick rocks. Step, breathe, step, breathe. The sensory details became hyper-specific. I noticed the texture of the old man's beard lichen hanging from the hemlocks. Pale green, hair like damp to the touch. I heard the scolding chatter of a stellar SJ somewhere high to my left. I reached the lake at 4:30 p.m. It was breathtaking. The water was perfectly still, a sheet of black glass reflecting the granite peaks above. There was no wind. The temperature had dropped, probably to the mid-40s. I could see my breath, small ghosts of vapor escaping my lips. I set up camp in a clearing about 50 yards from the water's edge. This is where my preparation paid off. I loved the tactile satisfaction of setting up the tent. The aluminum poles of the north face bastion snapped together with a magnetic click, click, click. I staked the rainfly taut, checking the tension lines. It was a geodesic dome, capable of withstanding 60 miles per hour winds. Felt impenetrable. A fortress of nylon and ripstop fabric. I inflated my sleeping pad, a Therm Rest Neo Air X-Therm. It sounded like crinkling potato chip bags as I unrolled it, a noise that seemed deafening in the stillness. Dinner was a mountain house, chicken and dumplings. I boiled water on my Jetboil flash. The blue flame roared like a mini jet engine, boiling 2 cups of water in 100 seconds. I poured the water into the pouch, sealed it, and waited the requisite 9 minutes. I sat on a log, eating the salty, reconstituted mush with a long-handled titanium spoon. Tasted amazing. Hunger is the best seasoning, they say. That was when I first felt it. It was not a sound. It was not a movement. It was a sudden, absolute absence of background noise. The birds had stopped. The wind had died. Even the low-frequency hum of insects seemed to have been cut with a switch. I stopped chewing. The spoon froze halfway to my mouth. I scanned the tree line. The woods were dense here, a wall of shadows as the sun dipped below the ridge. My eyes, accustomed to blue light filters and Excel spreadsheets, strained to make sense of the organic chaos. Rationalize it, my brain whispered. The wind changed directions. A hawk flew over, silencing the smaller birds. It's dusk. Diurnal animals are bedding down. Nocturnal ones have not started yet. It's the shift change. I took a sip of water from my Nalgene. Tasted like plastic and iodine. Then I smelled it. It was faint, carried on a draft of air that moved from the treeline toward the lake. It was not the smell of a bear, musky, wet dog, or a cougar, acrid ammonia. It was the smell of Old Spice high-endurance deodorant. And something else beneath it. Something sweet, like rotting fruit. My stomach tightened. Old Spice? Out here? I was 6 miles from the trailhead. The only car in the lot was that abandoned wreck. Hello, I called out. My voice sounded small, swallowed instantly by the trees. No answer. Is anyone there? Silence. I laughed. A short, nervous bark. "You're losing it, Mark. It's probably a day hiker passing through on the upper ridge, or maybe just a phantom scent memory. You used to wear Old Spice in college." I finished my meal, but the food sat heavy in my gut like wet cement. I cleaned the spoon, packed the trash into a Ziploc bag, leave no trace, and decided to hang my bear bag early. I walked about 100 yards away from the tent to find a suitable tree. I threw the line over a sturdy branch, hoisted the bag of food up 12 feet. As I was tying it off, I heard a snap, not a twig breaking under a small animal. The crack of a heavy branch, thick as a wrist, being stepped on or broken by something with significant mass, came from behind me. I spun around, my hand instinctively going to the canister of bear spray on my belt. I ripped the safety clip off. "Hey!" I shouted, louder this time. "I have bear spray." Nothing. Just the swaying of a fern frond about 30 feet away. I stood there for 2 full minutes, my thumb hovering over the trigger. I listened so hard my ears rang with tinnitus. Focus. Analyze. If it was a bear, I would hear it huffing or moving through the brush. Bears are not ninjas. If it was a cougar, I would not hear anything at all until it was on me. If it was a person, why would not they answer? Maybe they re-poaching, I thought. Illegal hunting. They do not want to be seen. I backed away slowly, keeping my eyes on the spot where the branch had snapped. I retreated to my tent, zipped the fly shut, and sat inside. The nylon walls were bright orange. They glowed in the fading light. I felt safe inside the bubble. It was irrational. Nylon ca not stop a knife or a claw, but it felt like a wall. I checked my Garmin in reach. No messages. I looked at the SOS button on the side. A small plastic flap covered it. Do not be an idiot, I told myself. You do not call search and rescue because you heard a stick break. You're a grown man. I changed into my sleeping layers, merino wool base layers. I lay down on top of the sleeping bag, listening. 7:45 p.m. The sun was gone. The woods were pitch black. And then I heard footsteps. Not the 4-legged cadence of an animal. These were bipedal. Rhythmic. Heavy. Crunch. Pause. Crunch. Pause. They were circling the tent. I sat up, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I grabbed my tactical flashlight, a Phoenix PD-35, and the bear spray. The footsteps stopped directly in front of the tent door, maybe 3 feet away. I could hear breathing. It was not the heavy panting of an exhausted hiker. It was slow, wet, congested breathing, like someone with a chest cold trying to be quiet. Wheeze, click, wheeze, click. Who's out there? I demanded, trying to inject authority into my voice. I'm armed. A lie, unless you count capsaicin spray as arms. A voice replied. It did not sound threatening. It sounded confused, flat. Do you have any milk? The question was so absurd, so completely out of context, that my brain stuttered. I blinked in the dark. What? Milk? The voice said again. It was a male voice, mid-40s maybe. American accent. But the tone was wrong. It was monotone like a customer service automated recording. I need milk for the cereal. My hand was shaking. This is a campsite, I said. I do not have milk. I have freeze-dried food. Oh, a pause. A long, agonizing pause. Is it 2%? I told you I do not have any, I shouted. Back away from the tent. You re-scaring me. I just need to clear the bowl, the voice said. Then the sound of a zipper. My zipper. The fly of my tent began to slide down slowly. Zip. I clicked the flashlight on. He was wearing a pair of dirty Kirkland brand jeans. The dad jeans you buy at Costco, and a faded red flannel shirt that was missing 2 buttons. He had no backpack, no water bottle, no headlamp, but the most disturbing thing was his face. He was clean-shaven. His skin was pale, pasty, like dough that had not been baked. And his eyes. He was not squinting against the 1,000-lumen beam. He was staring right into the light, his pupils pinned, unblinking. His mouth hung slightly open, wet at the corners. He did not look like a killer. He looked like an accountant who had walked out of his office in 1995 and just kept walking until his soul eroded away. "Please," he said, shielding his eyes with a hand that was covered in dried mud, or maybe dried blood. It was too dark under the fingernails to tell. "The light is very bright." "Get back," I warned, aiming the spray through the mesh. "Who are you? Where is your gear?" He tilted his head. "Gear? Your tent. Your pack. How did you get up here?" He looked down at his own hands, seemingly surprised to find them there. "I drove. The Chevy. The alternator is bad. The abandoned car at the trailhead. That was 6 miles away." He had walked 6 miles up 2,000 feet of elevation gain in jeans without water? "You need to leave," I said. "Go back to your car." "I see not," he said. He leaned closer to the mesh. I could smell him now. The Old Spice was overpowering, masking a sour stench of unwashed body and something metallic. "I lost the keys in the grass. Can I come in? It's cold." "No." I scrambled back against the far wall of the tent. "Absolutely not." It was a sound of profound disappointment, like a child told they could not have a toy. "Okay," he said. "Okay, I'll just wait." "Wait for what?" "For the store to open." He stood up. His movements were jerky, spasmodic. He did not turn around and walk away. He just stepped back into the darkness. I kept the light trained on him until he was swallowed by the trees. I sat there, freezing, the bear spray slick with sweat in my hand. My mind was racing, trying to categorize this. Mental illness? Dementia? A wanderer from a nearby town who got lost? It had to be dementia. That explained the nonsensical questions about milk, the lack of gear, the confusion. I should help him. The moral imperative of the wilderness is to help those in distress. If he stayed out here all night in a flannel shirt, he would be hypothermic by morning. But my gut, that primal, lizard brain instinct that evolved over millions of years to keep mammals from being eaten, was screaming at me. "Do not open the zipper. Do not go out there." I grabbed my Garmin. I needed to send a message. Not an SOS, maybe, but a message to my brother. * weird guy at camp. Aggressive. If I miss check-in tomorrow, call Rangers. * I pressed the button to wake the screen. No signal. I stared at it. I had a clear view of the sky. I paid $34.99 a month for the premium satellite subscription. I should have global coverage. I held it up higher, pressing it against the tent ceiling. No signal. A twig snapped. Closer this time. Right by the rainfly. "Mark!" The voice came from inches away from my head, separated only by the thin nylon wall. I froze. I had not told him my name. "Mark!" the voice whispered. It was not the confused, monotone voice anymore. It was lower, lucid. "I know you have milk, Mark. I saw you buy the powdered kind at REI on Saturday. The Nido brand. Whole milk powder." My blood turned to ice. I had bought Nido. I had bought it at the REI in downtown Seattle 3 days ago. "How?" I croaked. "You were wearing the gray hoodie." The voice continued. "You paid with a Visa ending in 4092. SKRRRT. SKRRRT. You looked like a man who wanted to be alone," he whispered. "Are you alone now?" I did not answer. My throat had constricted, a physical knot of muscle spasms blocking any sound. The rational part of my brain, the solutions architect part, was desperately trying to run a root cause analysis on what he had just said. He knows the credit card number. He knows the item. Theory A. He followed me from Seattle. He followed my car for 3 hours, waited for me to park, hiked 6 miles up a mountain in jeans, just to mess with me. Probability, low. Why the elaborate theater? Why the confused old man act? Theory B, he hacked my digital footprint. My phone was in my pocket. If he had a skimmer or a localized Stingray device. Probability, impossible. We are in a dead zone, and he looks like a vagrant. Theory C, there is no theory C. I scrambled to the center of the tent, putting as much distance as possible between myself and the thin orange nylon. I grabbed my knife, a Benchmade bug-out with a drop-point blade. Felt ridiculously small. A 3-inch piece of steel against the unknown. I have a satellite phone. I lied, my voice cracking. I've already alerted the rangers. They have our GPS coordinates. They en route. Silence from outside. Then, a low, wet sound. Sniff. He was smelling the tent fabric. Inhaling the scent of the interior. You lying, Mark, the voice said. It was not angry. It was matter of fact. The rangers do not come up here on Tuesdays. Budget cuts. You read that on the Washington Trails Association forum. User Hiker Mike 88 posted about it last month. You upvoted the comment. The terms of service you did not read. Then he stopped talking. The silence that followed was heavier than the conversation. I sat there, cross-legged on my sleeping pad, gripping the knife until my knuckles turned white. I waited for the zipper to move. I waited for the knife to... I could hear the wind brushing the tops of the fir trees 100 feet up. And then I heard the humming. It was soft, barely audible. A lullaby. Rock-a-bye baby, on the treetop. It was coming from the back of the tent now. He had moved silently, circling around to the side where my head had been resting earlier. I rotated my body, facing the sound. Then the wall of the tent pressed in. He was sitting down right against the tent, using my shelter as a backrest. We were separated by less than a millimeter of fabric. If I reached out, I could poke him. If he leaned back hard enough, he would collapse the poles. I stopped breathing. I sat perfectly still like a statue. I was terrified that if I shifted my weight, the rustle of the sleeping bag would provoke him. The stars are very clear. You should come out. We could look at Cassiopeia. You like astronomy. You have that app on your phone, Sky Guide. I did not respond. No? Okay. We can just sit. And we did. For 4 hours. I checked my watch. 11:14 p.m. 12:30 a.m. He never moved. The impression of his back remained pressed against the tent wall. Occasionally, I would hear him shift, the fabric rubbing against his flannel shirt. Once, I heard him cough. A wet, hacking sound that rattled in his chest. I thought about stabbing him. The thought was intrusive and, what if this is a prank or a mental health crisis and I go to prison for murder? So I did nothing. I sat in the dark, shivering, watching the indentation of a stranger's back against my sanctuary. Around 4:00 a.m., the temperature plummeted. Frost began to form on the inside of the rainfly. Mark! I flinched. He had not spoken in 2 hours. Yeah, I whispered. I could not help it. The social contract of answering when spoken to is so deeply rewired, even in terror. The milk is not for me, he said. His voice sounded sad. S for the kittens. What kittens? The ones in the river. They get so cold. Something small and heavy being placed on the ground right outside the vestibule. Goodbye, Mark, he said. Check your credit score. And then the footsteps walked away. I listened to them fade. 10 yards, 50 yards, until they were swallowed by the vast, indifferent silence of the forest. I did not move for another 2 hours. I waited until the sun was fully up. The light hit the tent at 7:15 a.m., turning the orange nylon into a glowing cathedral of safety. The birds started singing again. The normal world had returned. I unzipped the door. My hands were shaking so bad it took me 3 tries to grab the zipper pull. I pushed the mesh open and crawled out into the cold morning air. The campsite was empty. The lake was glass. It looked exactly like a postcard for the Pacific Northwest, serene and beautiful. I looked at the ground. The dirt around my tent was churned up. Boot prints. Hundreds of them. They formed a perfect circle around my tent. A trench of trampled mud where he had walked, over and over and over again, pacing like a caged animal while I tried to sleep. I followed the tracks to the back of the tent. There was a flattened patch of grass where he had sat. And there, pressed into the mud, was the clear imprint of a hand. I looked at the vestibule, where he had dropped something before leaving. It was a wallet. My wallet. I patted my back pocket. Empty. I grabbed the wallet from the dirt. It was cold and damp. I opened it. My driver's license was there. My health insurance card. But my credit cards, my Visa, my Amex, my debit card were gone. And in the billfold, where the cash should have been, there was a folded piece of paper. It was a receipt. A thermal paper receipt from a Safeway in North Bend. Time-stamped 3:42 a.m. this morning. He had left me at 4 o'clock a.m. North Bend was a 2-hour drive from the trailhead. The timeline did not work. Physics did not work. I looked at the items listed on the receipt. 1 gallon whole milk, 1 box matches 1 pack Bic razors, and at the bottom, written in blue ballpoint pen, "Thanks for the data point. I did not pack my tent. I left it standing there. I left the $800 sleeping bag. I left the stove. I grabbed my car keys, my phone, and I ran. I ran the 6 miles back to the trailhead in under an hour. I twisted my ankle twice, but the adrenaline acted as a numb anesthetic. When I got to the parking lot, the rusted Chevy Silverado was gone. My Subaru was there. It looked untouched. I unlocked it, threw my body into the driver's seat, and locked the doors. I turned the ignition. The engine roared to life. I have never loved the sound of internal combustion so much. I drove to the nearest police station in Snoqualmie. I looked like a maniac. Unshaven, wild-eyed, smelling of sweat and fear. The officer at the desk listened to my story. He took notes. He nodded at the parts about the footprints. But when I showed him the receipt, his brow furrowed. "Sir," he said, tapping the paper, "this receipt is dated for tomorrow." I looked at it again. October 16th. Today was the 15th. It's probably just a calibration error on the store's machine, the officer said. The rationalizer. He was doing it for me. And the guy probably pickpocketed you at the trailhead before you hiked up, then followed you to mess with your head. We see it sometimes. Drifters getting aggressive. He took a report. He promised to send a patrol car up to the trailhead to tag the abandoned vehicle if it returned. He told me to cancel my cards. I drove back to the city. I stayed in a hotel that night, a high-rise in Bellevue with a doorman and key card access elevators. I ordered room service. I did not sleep. I spent the night scrubbing my online presence. I deleted my Reddit account. I deleted LinkedIn. I requested my data be removed from every broker site I could find. I thought it was over. I rationalized it as a bizarre, terrifying robbery by a tech-savvy meth addict. But 3 months later, I got a notification from my credit monitoring service. An attempt to open a new line of credit in my name. It was not for a credit card. It was a mortgage application. For a house in Gordon Head, Victoria. The address was right next door to where I had lived with my ex-wife 5 years ago. I called the bank to flag it as fraud. The customer service rep was helpful, apologetic. She asked me the standard security questions. Mother's maiden name. Name of first pet. And finally, "Sir," she said, "just to verify your identity. Can you confirm the purchase you made this morning at 4 o'clock a.m.? I froze. I was in my apartment. I had not left since yesterday. "I did not make a purchase," I said. "Oh," she paused. "It shows a transaction at a 7-Eleven in North Bend. For 1 gallon of milk." I hung up the phone. I walked to my window and looked down at the street, 20 stories below. Traffic was moving. People were walking their dogs. The world was proceeding with its cold, mechanical logic. But across the street, standing on the corner, looking up at my specific window, was a man in a red flannel shirt. He held a phone to his ear. My phone rang. I did not answer it. I just watched him. He looked up, met my eyes from 20 floors away, and tapped his wrist, as if checking a watch. Shift change.